Well, folks, here we go. This is the first one of the interviews from the Near Death Experience series, and you're about to meet the wonderful Shen from Colorado. Now, I promise you, I'm not doing the typical YouTuber thing of saying, please watch all of this video. But honestly, if you are interested in UAP, near death experiences, consciousness, any of that, for God's sake, watch all of this interview. The first half of it has got an incredible near death experience with all of the trappings that you've come to expect. So, white light, entities, telepathy, emotional communication. The second half of the interview has got one of the most interesting UFO abduction accounts that I have ever heard. And for the record, I think is totally legit. I didn't want to interrupt Shen, but his encounter reminds me of so many of the accounts as reported by Jacques Vallée, Dr. John Mack, etc., etc., etc. It's fascinating. And even more important than all that, he is just such a lovely dude. And I'm very grateful to have got to know him. So I've gushed enough. I hope you enjoy it. And this is Shen. Dude, I really appreciate you taking the time and having the courage to speak about your experience.
Yeah, I haven't done that much, so this will be a first. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the whole UFO, aspect of it. Because for me, when it happened, I was about, I think 3 months into a transdimensional art piece,
Right.
where there were all sorts of ET, other species, not Earth-based species, coming out of my imagination. And since then, I've kind of opened up the idea that imagination is like a portal, to sort of a transdimensional
Yes.
consciousness. And whatever you're open to mentally, just like in metaphysical sense, will come through. And I was like wide open just because I was trying to figure out, what is the truth without human programming or human
Oh,
beliefs.
wow.
And
Overlays.
so
Yeah.
when I opened that realm up, a lot of strange things started happening. Um,
That's
and
fascinating. Well,
yeah, so
let's just wind it back and start with the normal. So you're
yeah.
an artist, I presume?
Yeah, but not professional. I do it as a hobby, but I'm starting to think about going, maybe putting my stuff out there for the public. Yeah.
Good man, good man.
Yeah.
And so, what sort of have you always been into the art, or is it a
I think when
semi
I was a
recent?
kid, it was basically, just coloring books like a kid would. And, my drawings, if I look back at them, they didn't seem all of that. But in high school, which over here is when you're, a teenager, um, I started drawing and it, just start progressing. And then I think in my 20s, because I was also in the military for a brief stint, when
Uh-huh.
I came back, I did LSD for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And LSD really blew my mind open, artistically, I would say, or in a lot of different ways, spiritually, everything. And I started exploring art more from a different perspective where just everything had more depth and more meaning, metaphorically speaking, than
Mm-hmm.
before. Before, like I would draw something and I would just draw something, but after that LSD experience, art had like more meaning to me. And so I started exploring that. And then
Interesting.
that's when I would say, yeah, I became more of an artist per se.
Amazing. I'm really, really interested. In fact, I was having a conversation 5 minutes ago with a
Yeah,
guy about like flow state and how that comes through arty people, but like everybody,
yeah,
like you can be driving to work and get there and be like, oh my God, what have I been doing for the last 15 minutes? But then there's
yeah,
something about like when you have a jam on a guitar or you just have a blank canvas and no plan and
totally.
stuff comes through you. I find it really, really fascinating.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I had a lot of childhood trauma. So after the military, I went to college. It wasn't really doing it for me. So then I ended up in a trade school, which was kind of centered around massage therapy and holistic medicine.
Hmm.
And that's when I started doing yoga, meditation, qigong, and energy work. And when I started doing those more internal psychosomatic processes, it affected me consciously. and consciousness, as you mentioned. And I
Mm,
started that's when I started to open up the idea about programming, and trying to remove the assumptions of human programming, kind of just open up to the flow state of consciousness, like what is real, what is truth, what is possible, and things got really interesting. I When I had the near death experience, I definitely wasn't expecting it. I think if I do have any sort of self-destructiveness, it was always kind of unconscious.
mm-hmm,
So for me, it was an overdose,
mm-hmm.
and I would not have known or chosen that, I just it was very
Oh,
terrifying.
I
It
can
wasn't a positive
imagine.
experience. It wasn't a positive experience. It was really scary. I mean, I was dying and I knew it, and it got really scary. But I did come out the other side, and that's why I can talk about it. But it was definitely not planned, and it's nothing I would wish on anyone as far as a form of a wake up or realization
Mm-hmm.
place.
So, I mean, without being kind of grisly and gruesome and
Mm.
in it for the drama, can you give me some detail on going through the experience and how you felt and what your awareness was and that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing?
So I think like I was trying to, since I talked to you and we talked about this, about giving this interview, I was trying to trace back, how old was I? When was that? Because it's a kind of a gray area where, it's not something you're proud of, especially because it was an
Mm,
overdose. It's not something you talk about publicly because it's kind of fringe consciousness as far as the subject matter. Um, and so I placed the album that I was listening to when I actually died. Because I remember that more than anything. I was listening to uh, DJ Kicks put out an album by Kruder and Dorfmeister back in the day, a mixed album. It was really good, and that album was released in '96. But then the album that came on after it, which is actually how I saved myself after the poisoning of my body, was Charlotte the Baroness's Electric Manor Volume 1 off of Sunburn Records out of Frisco. Really good DJ,
wow.
female DJ. And that was released in '98. So I would have been 25 in '98. And that tracks. I think I just gotten that album on a CD because it came on right when I was like, oh, excuse me. I got to do something, I mean, I'm dying, or I was dead. I got to get up and like do something. And I remember at the time I was afraid to go to the hospital, which is why I ended up, I think, in that state.
Yeah.
But basically what happened was, so it was '98, I was 25. 2 days before that, I had been at a rave in the desert of San Diego, outside San Diego. And some kid sold me these little tiny psychedelic mushrooms. I don't know what kind they were. I've never seen them since. They weren't anything I've ever seen. And some X. And I remember like I candy flipped or hippie flipped that night. And I think the mistake I made the night that I died was because I've thought about it a lot since is I think at the rave I only ate like one or two mushrooms, little tiny things. And then I took the ecstasy and I danced all night. And I mean there were UFOs there. I mean if we're gonna talk about the strange crossover state and the way that things are kind of in your realm
Oh,
and
I
things
I
happen.
definitely want to hear about that. Yeah, yeah.
Right. I mean, so there were sightings like right there above the rave, and I've noticed that before. I've been to only a few raves in my life. I'm not a total party animal, but every time I've gone, there's been ET activity. I don't know if they're just there for the vibes, what's going on, but I've noticed that in the three different occasions of the three different major raves, or now they're called festivals I've been to. So
Uh-huh.
obviously I haven't been to many. I've only been to three, but so. I came home, the next morning after that party. I went a day because I was like, I wanted the experience of doing mushrooms again to be powerful.
Hmm.
And so I waited a day for kind of my system to cleanse. The next day, I had free time again, and I think I just ate the rest of that bag.
Right.
And I didn't think about like before, dude, you only ate one or two and you were, on going for like at least 10 hours. They were really strong. And so it started to hit me like 15 minutes into having tossed all those in my mouth. I was like, I'm not feeling good. So I tried to make myself sick to get some of it out of my body. Could not. Then I looked in the mirror. I was like turning like green and blue. I mean, literally. And I don't think I was tripping out because nothing else was like melting or getting weird. And I was just like, oh, I'm shutting down. And I remember not wanting to ask for help because I was embarrassed. a
Hmm.
young person thing, some kind of pride. I don't know what it was, but I was afraid to ask for help, and I definitely didn't want to go to the hospital and get my stomach pumped. And especially if I'm like, having a trip, I didn't want to have that
Oh,
negativity,
oh my God, no.
and so I was like stuck in a hard place spiritually where it was like, well, you don't want to ask for human help, but you're also, you're in the grips of something that I was starting to feel the fear.
Hmm.
But then some part of me was just like, okay, well, I messed up, kind of just sort of accepted it. I remember laying down and everything just kind of, I remember when I started to die, it was like it started in my consciousness, it seemed to start in my feet and started like creeping up like a numbness. And when it got to my chest, like my heart stopped, and because it kind of, when it came up, it also was going at my arms. And it came up here, my heart stopped, and then everything. And I remember just kind of like floating out of my body and looking down at my body and seeing, like, at that point I was like pasty white, kind of gray color. And and then it was just like a feeling of being pulled up into the atmosphere. I remember like floating up out of, like, through the house, out of the ceiling, up into the sky. And at some point when I was in the sky, like high up in the clouds, I started to feel, so I lost my brother when I was 10 years old and he was 14.
Hmm.
Leukemia, cancer took him out in like 10 months. And so he
Oh.
actually died in the same house I was having this experience. I felt his presence. And I don't have many, like, since he passed, a lot of, I think, that pain, it got blocked out. And I would only have little snippets of time, like probably 5 times since he passed, when I kind of felt him near me. Either he came to me in a dream or I had a thought about him and felt him. But other than that, he was very distant. Well, I felt his presence, like, near me, and it was very comforting.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that was, real. I don't know, in this kind of experience, you don't know what was real, but if, it really felt like him, and I don't know how it distinctly felt like him, but it did. It was like implicit. There was no suggestion. It was him, and it was like a very comforting, almost like a guide, like it's going to be okay. And I remember that's
Hmm.
when I started to feel impressions. I don't remember exact words, but I definitely know there were like feelings being imparted to me that inspired thoughts, is all I can, almost like, psychic kind of
Yeah,
phenomena.
totally. Totally, yeah.
And him and whatever else, it felt like maybe a little group of, I don't know if they're angels, I don't know what they're, if they're spirit guides, I don't know what they were, but they were kind of imparting to me, like making me feel safe, calming me down, because I obviously was terrified.
Hmm. Mm.
Uh, I mean, I just, died, like, and I was, and coming to terms with it as I was going up in the atmosphere. I think when we got kind of like up into what you would call space, space was more like, it wasn't dark. It was more like a light portal. Everything
Hmm.
was just really bright, a lot of light, um, up past the clouds. And that's when I heard, and it's funny because I've heard people talk about this, but I heard like a music, like, and I mean, to me, like, musically, and I love music, so I know all the instruments. It sounded like a lot of trumpets. That's something out of, like, here in the Bible. It was like a
Yeah.
crazy amount of wind instruments, like all going off at once, but harmoniously, and just, but like crazy, like huge and loud. It kind of like gave a space, the space size or dimension. It was like really large sound, like as if you're going to hear an organ in a huge chapel somewhere. It just had that really big kind of sound to it. And I remember that's when they were like kind of somehow directed me to kind of look back at my life and make peace, or see how I felt about everything.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about, I went all over the place in that time period, as far as, I don't remember it being like, how I've heard some people say of like images uh of my life, like in some sort of photo book, but there was a collage sense to it, and there was a lot of, uh it went, through when I was a baby, till then. So it covered all of my life up to that point. Um, but it was interesting. I remember when I came to thinking about that art piece that I was working on, this transdimensional piece, and I wasn't finished. And I was like, I remember literally, I think I said, like, fuck, like, I'd not finished with that art piece. And I had that resistance because I was like, I really want to finish that. It felt really important. And, and they were kind of like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I didn't finish that. And that disagreement I had, I mean, it just like, whew, just dropped me right back down into my body. And I remember the first thing started to come to is I started to feel like kind of the sense of my skin. And then I started hearing a little bit of sound. And my eyes were open the whole time, but I finally started to get a little bit like it was gray and then fuzzy, and then I started to see again. And I remember my immediate thought was back to like, I'm, I got to cleanse my body. I got to do something because I couldn't get this toxins out, and I knew enough about because of holistic medicine what was going on that that was like toxic, that it actually killed me. That I kind of remember rolling over and looking at myself in the mirror, and I saw myself, and I still looked dead, but so I flashed away from that, and I saw that picture, and in this picture that I was drawing, there's an entity running into a galaxy. And I remember I was just like, run, motherfucker, run. So I got up. And it was so strange because the CD player, because it was a 5 disc changer, old school Harman Kardon piece of gear, changed over to this album by DJ the Baroness, Electric Manor Volume 1. And it came on, and I just like pushed myself up, and I was just like started like jogging in place. I mean, I was burping, I was like coughing, and I ran that whole album. I ran for 80 minutes. And I remember
Wow.
the first 5 minutes, I was, dying. And the 10 and then 20, I was starting to sweat profusely, but it was like pure terror, like driving me. It was like it was like adrenaline, like, life or
Mm,
death run. It
literally,
was like,
yeah.
and I kept going. And when I was like 30, 40 minutes into it, man, I started to feel good, and when it was like, it started to feel really good. Like I was cleansing stuff through me, like burning calories. And when I got like 80 minutes to towards the end of the album, uh, I was feeling, like I was, Jesus, I need to go preach the good word. You know what I mean? I was like, I had reached a state where I was like, I had overcome something so huge
Yeah.
and taken to someplace so like not of this earth, that when I was finally back and I was like, actually, okay, I've survived. I felt like, too good. Like I was like, you need to stay in your room. Don't go anywhere. Like you're way too, high, too happy,
Yeah.
too excited, too insightful. I felt like scared of sharing all I had realized and how I was feeling, what I was thinking, that I just survived that. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the experience.
That's amazing, man. When you said that there were, um, let's respectfully say, like beings or
Yeah,
entities,
yeah,
can you
intelligently.
do, could you do, could were you able to perceive what they looked like or anything?
They didn't give me any visuals. They were very gentle. They were very present. They were as present as, you here.
Yeah.
They were there, but they didn't speak in words. They imparted like feelings, but something about them, did kind of have language to it, but it didn't at the same time. I don't know how they do that. It was
Mm.
like when it came into my mind, it seemed like words, but I didn't hear
Yeah.
anyone speak them.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like
I've heard
impression.
people describe that as like gnosis when you rather than like hearing it like a conversation word by word, it's like when you remember a conversation you've had and you just get the whole concept in your head at once kind of thing. So
Yeah, it was an
that's
impression.
yeah, that's
Very
fascinating.
articulate impressions. And somehow
Amazing.
my brother was mixed in, and like I said, I don't know if he was real, but or if they just somehow extracted that from my mind to help me. I don't know. It was like so beyond.
Fascinating. So, and how has that changed? I mean, has it changed your view of the world? Like, did
Oh yeah,
anything change you from before to after?
definitely. Yeah, because I think I was pretty pessimistic at the time, pretty bitter, pretty angry. Like I said, I was right in the process, going to massage school, of healing from a lot of trauma I didn't even know I had. Um, and my brother was part of it, definitely, but then there was more traumas I didn't know about that came out as well, and uh, that experience definitely, obviously opened me up to the idea that this isn't all there is. Because I definitely felt like I could have let go. It felt very, it was the best feeling ever to let go of all the pressure and the God, what do you call that? It's like the stress of life, the memory of failures and when you haven't succeeded, or even the stress to try and succeed, or just all that human stuff, all that that painful kind of psychologically traumatic socialization crap that we're all inundated with. Oh, you're American. Oh, you're a male. Oh, you're white. Oh,
Mm,
you're this height. Oh, how muscular. How much money do you have? All that crap that we get, it just faded away, and all that there was just me as some sort of uh, spirit or consciousness. Some there, I was still there. Like I never felt like I was not myself. I just no longer had my body. So it also kind of really brought that home, that we are not just our body, that that there is some sort of like identity that is intangible, because obviously I wasn't in my body and I was still me, and I
hmm
still felt like me, whatever that means to say I feel like me when you don't have a body. But there is like feelings I feel that I go beyond the senses, you
hmm
know, and or at least I have that experience, I can't say there aren't anymore because I had that experience. Maybe I didn't know that before. Maybe before that I only thought, I feel because I feel and I smell and I
Yeah.
see. But I mean, at that point, like I remember have feelings even as just a consciousness. So
Fascinating. Absolutely
yeah,
fascinating.
there's a
So
lot to that.
there really is. I mean, it's there's that Alan Watts talk where he says like we say my hand, my eyes, my head, my heart, but it's like, well, these are things I own. They aren't me, and it's like, so what is me? Which part of that is me?
Totally.
And I find that really really interesting. He said like, if I chop my arm off, I'm not like 10% less me. So where am I in this thing? Like it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I still don't know. It's very amorphous and very strange and mysterious to be alive and know that that's real.
hmm So where's your head at these days then? How's your outlook changed, kind of?
Well, now I'm be 52 this year. So, that was over 26, 27 years ago.
hmm
Um, gosh, I've gone through a lot since then. I think, it wasn't long after that. I think like 2 years later, I moved to Maui and ended up, going deep on the hippie realm. I like
hmm
grew out dreadlocks and I was still doing art. I still have a lot of interdimensional contact. Since then, like in that picture that I'm talking about that saved my life, that I was drawing at the time, that really opened me up to transdimensional contact. Uh,
hmm
a lot of aliens with elongated heads were coming out in my art. They identified themselves like a 13th dimensional uh, species of shapeshifters and dreamweavers. And so, kind of created some mythologies out of that. I'm like writing a movie script right now, kind of that has them in it. You know what I mean? Like, so
Awesome.
it's impacted my life.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
piece of art and that experience, and it's changed me forever. It's obviously, that many years have gone by. It's taken me a long time to really come to a place where I articulate with confidence, and I kind of feel like in this day and age, it's maybe more acceptable than it has been in the past. I think in the
Yeah.
past, there was a lot more fear and
hmm
ridicule around that experience.
Yeah.
So it feels a little bit more socially acceptable.
Well, that's true, and that's a massive aspect of kind of the UFO thing and also the consciousness thing. I mean, now, ADHD wasn't a thing 20 years ago, but I definitely remember, you know, like being in school and sitting on
Yeah,
my hands and all of
undiagnosed.
that. Yeah, 100%, but so I'm really interested by the interdimensional entity side that you're describing. Like, do you mind sort of just coloring in a little on that?
Yeah, sure. What do you want to know?
Whatever you feel like saying about it. I mean, most people, it's the kind of thing where as people are more, so two things. Like, first of all, there must be, because I've had weird stuff happen. You've had weird stuff happen. And like,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm this special, unique little flower. So there must be tons of people out there that have had extraordinary experiences and are either haven't got like a social circle that they can talk about it, or they've just convinced themselves that like, no, that can't possibly have happened. But
For
it's
sure.
just like the UFO thing. Like when these
Yep.
people get together and they're like, wait a minute, did that happen to you too? Like, and then there's people from all around the world that
Yeah.
are having similar experiences. And if you did that in a laboratory, that's called good laboratory conditions. You know, that's good evidence worth studying when independent sources are having repeatable results. So
Right.
I really feel like we're on the verge of a new understanding of what the hell we're doing here and what it's all about, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
One thing that strikes me about it that's strange is all these experiences, and I don't know if it's human programming or if it's just the brain itself, or I have to believe it has to do with our programming as humans. Every experience I've had that's sort of, supernatural or, unexplainable scientifically and medically up to, to this date or whatever they've admitted to this date, whatever. Because I don't really, I think there's obviously, when you consider the subject at this point, there's secret science.
Mhm,
So I think, our actual, and even I don't feel people are even taking quantum physicists who are outspoken about what they found as realistically as they should. Everyone's kind of denying that, physicists are saying, hey, you really do make your own reality. People are just like, yeah, whatever, bro, that's cool. They're not really applying that to like their everyday life. They're still, going about their business with these like blinders on about how impactful their beliefs are. So to go back to that thing where I'd opened up to uh, everything, being, what is everything, what is real, allowing reality to be as opposed to assuming what it is or what it can't be,
mhm,
opening that mental space up, and at the same time doing meditation, energy work. So working with a lot of sort of esoteric, subtle realms of being, because when I started doing the energy work, that really shifted things for me, as well as the yoga and such, because it did something in a transdimensional sense. I remember I started seeing ghosts, which I hadn't seen since I was like a little kid, because I was one of those kids, like I remember like when I used to go to church and pray to the Holy Spirit, like, and I was brought up a Catholic, like I remember as a kid being a lot more in touch with that sense of God or creator and angels and all that whole mythology I was given by religion at the time, and through all the life traumas that happened to me with my brother, et cetera, a lot of that got blacked out. But what I was going to say was, I feel like as an adult, relating to these supernatural experiences, a lot of them come and are not only in my mind like categorized, but they're almost like dreams
mhm,
because they're so unreal and they're so strange that even though I remember seeing them with my own eyes and the same body that drives down the road every day and is, legally allowed to like operate a machine that weighs thousands of pounds, traveling at 80 miles an hour, they get framed as like some sort of surreal dream, like, and I'm always questioning, like, did that really happen? And so for me, I had to kind of just like with my art, and when I started seeing these transdimensional entities, I had to kind of consciously in place a framework where it was like, okay, when I have these strange phenomena, it's okay. It's to accept them, to embrace them, and to be like, and I think the biggest thing that comes up for anybody that's been brought up in Western medicine is, am I crazy? Am I
mhm.
hallucinating? Am I losing my mind? Because they give us all this fear. And for me, like the way I always check that is like, am I? Am I, like, because if I can operate everything, in society, like driving is a good example, and I can do that properly, and I rely on the same senses, and I'm now perceiving this very strange phenomena with, why? What's the danger? They're not, it's not like I'm hearing voices telling me to like, kill somebody or something demonic
Yeah,
or weird.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
all very positive. They're all very, they're just otherworldly. They're just not human. And so that really helped me, kind of just taking a making a conscious choice to accept them as real, because they kept getting framed as like, oh, you're tripping out. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, that was some weird dream. It's like, no, that was real and that really happened. And it's okay to accept that as real, and you're not crazy and you're not seeing things. And it's helped, I think, a couple of times, I've had experiences that are strange, and I've been able to share them with someone else. And I think sometimes having a witness helps, and for someone like myself, it's definitely intends to relate to a disclosure as it's happening. because it really is focus and I understand why it's happening the way it is. It really is just focusing on, a lot of aerospace engineers, people who have
Yeah.
actual literal proof, have worked with technologies, machines. I think a lot of the people that have been having contact or abductees, or I think a lot of that is in this interim of disclosure getting pushed away. And,
Hmm.
like, oh, that's, we don't want to associate that with this because we don't want to be ridiculed and dismissed like we were for the
Yeah.
last 80 years. And I totally get it. But it has been frustrating because for those of who already have proof from personal experience that all this stuff is real, it's definitely like you're kind of just pushed to the back burner, and kind
That's
of,
exactly. So there's a guy I really respect called Grant Cameron, and he's done some amazing work on this, and he talks about that. He's like, at the moment, if you're a pilot or a physicist and you have some weird encounter, they're like, "Oh, come on down,
totally, totally,
get on this podcast, come on this show."
totally.
He's like, but if you're actually an experiencer, or like
Yeah.
some weird thing has come out and spoken to you, they're just like, just. And next thing you know, the shepherd's crook comes off and whips you
Yeah,
off
yeah,
the
totally.
stage altogether. He's like, they
Totally.
don't want to know, and but I think it's. I understand if you're trying to drag this into Congress,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
a lot of kind of semi-elderly people. It's much easier to say like Marvin the Martian and his little metal spaceship has come all the way here and we've seen him,
totally.
than saying like, okay, so the jinn or your spirit guides and all that, that's all real. We're creating this all with our own like pan-conscious thing, and like it's just a bit. It's a big cake to eat for a lot of people, I think, man. So
I am liking though how it's coming out with the whole the psychic driving of of the vehicles,
yeah,
the CIA reports on telepathy and things that astral or remote viewing, and that I'm
yeah,
glad all these because that's the intersection, and it is real that that these entities that are not of this earth, or of this dimension that we're in, they do use all these phenomena, or abilities. They are
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and they're very good at it. They're
I totally
very
believe that.
masterful. Yeah,
Even to speak in terms of materialism and science, if you're traveling faster than light,
yeah,
it's as simple as like you driving it like a car is not going to work because the light between the meteorite that you're going to run into is going at light speed into your eyes, being converted into electrical signals, going down your arm. You're working the joystick, by which time it's already like smashed you to pieces. He's like, the
yeah,
only thing faster than light, which we're learning through quantum entanglement, is consciousness.
totally,
So quantum entanglement seems to be superliminal, so it makes sense that either the craft is conscious or
yeah,
your interface is conscious. Like it's just if you keep refining the technology, you end up with consciousness in a biological organism. That's what
totally.
we're in, We can't build
Totally.
it yet. It's far too more it's more advanced than our best technology.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, like, so if we were going to come up with a framework of how I arrived here, it definitely part of it was, probably just some sort of spiritual makeup, as far as like how I was created. But then beyond that, consciously, I had to make that decision to like open up to whatever is instead of assuming what is real and what is not. So that was the first part, opening up my mind or my consciousness to the possibility of what is real. And then the second part would be that part where I had to accept that, okay, now that I'm starting to have these strange experiences, I need to create a safe space in my own consciousness for them to exist, where they're not going to be dismissed, and I'm not going to down some dark rabbit hole of pseudoscience, thinking I'm crazy and I'm insane, and I need to go, check in with Big Brother and get into an institution and be put on
Yeah.
drugs. You know what I mean? Because that is the dark direction you can be
Yep.
taken if you believe in their propaganda and their fear mongering, that to me is kind of like a predefinition of the limit, or they're trying to limit consciousness and
Hmm.
limit the human being, and I feel like religion, science are both guilty of this predefinition, of
Hmm.
assumptions, and I just don't think it's healthy for us to go in that direction, because I mean I just don't feel that science can, if just because they can't prove that spirit is real, or consciousness as itself, or life after death, doesn't mean they can say it's not. And I think
Yeah.
that's where they keep making this big mistake, is somehow this presumptuousness that And they don't even, I don't know, the ones that are doing, I don't know if they see that they're doing it or not, but they're kind of behaving just like religious people,
I
where they're
agree.
zealously saying, like, well, this isn't possible. Well, no, you just
That's
haven't.
not in the book. It's not real.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think I know there's a quote. I don't know what it is, but the gist of it is, super advanced technology or sciences or things beyond our capabilities would appear as magic or
indistinguishable
supernatural.
from magic. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah. I
it
really like that other one as well. That absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and I
right.
think that's really cool.
It's very, because it's going to be very, applicable to what we're dealing with, and because it's beyond our intelligence and our abilities to measure
Yeah,
these things right now. And just like the
yeah.
electromagnetic spectrum, we can't hear or see it all, but it still
Hmm.
exists. I think this is a similar thing metaphorically. That there's obviously things that are much more intelligent than us,
Hmm.
much more advanced than us, and all you can do with that awareness, I think, is be humble and be open to what there is to learn about that realm. But when I started doing that, so when I finally created the safe space, created the open mind, then things just got really weird, and not in a bad way, but just where does it end? What do I do with this? And I think as a young man, I didn't have all the tools to deal with that energy, and a lot of it came out in my art. I definitely have a lot of art with these other species coming through. They come through a lot in the So say like you're drawing a character or a scene, and then you're doing like shading, sort of the abstract space of a shadow structure that defines another figure or structure of either a being or a tree or a cloud, or they would usually come out in the sort of chaos of the shading.
Hmm.
And I would usually see their eyes first, but there was usually like an impression of like a face that came with the eyes, whether it be a nose, cheekbones. And so a lot of faces would come through. And that's when I first started having these interactions. And just like the entities that helped me in that near death experience, these entities also seem to transmit um, feelings or information, some better than others. Some of them just transmit feelings, like, they're happy, they're sad, they're a lot of times they're just happy to be seen.
Hmm.
And once again, like I said, I mean, this was like, wow, it got weird. It gets weird because you're just like, what is this? Is this real? And
Yeah,
and how much attention should I pay to this, and who should I talk to about this? Well,
yeah,
my thing was like no one, so I just kept doing my art, and I still doing it, and they still come through, but I think somebody who's looking at my art might think I put it there, but it's like,
yeah,
no, I didn't. I have an imagination, but it's not this good. Like, it's not. I don't know how
yeah,
to. It's like they come through, and I bring them through. I did not make that per se. I was definitely there when it came through, but I wasn't like, I'm gonna draw this eye in that face. It was like I was doing a random thing. It was
yeah.
there. I paid attention. I listened, and and they still do that. And the ones that had the most impact, though, because a lot of them were just kind of like background noise. I don't know how I was connected to them. They just came through. And there's only been a few times because I'm kind of, maybe it's my religious programming. I'm not Catholic now, but you know, I've been opposed to like letting more like sort of the demon realm,
Hmm.
like when faces come through that start like looking a little like get off on suffering or scaring me. I usually
Hmm.
kind of like close off to them. So
Hmm.
I try and keep it with entities that are more on the realm of like positivity, intelligent, love, because there is another realm, and I did notice it as well when I
Hmm.
started to interact with those beings, that yeah, I could go in the demon realm, but they I don't trust them. So I went in
No,
more of the
rightly so. Yeah, it's like any
no.
wild animal. You got to kind of read the vibes, haven't you? And
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think, I think if you're
Yes.
positive and smiling, then you attract the things that are going to be more friendly. But there's
That's what I
definitely
wanted. I wanted the good ones, and it
a
really
lot of
was. It
non-verbal.
felt like a radio, like a radio transmitter. It felt like you could
Mm,
tune in with your intentions. So
yeah,
my intention has always been like, what's the positive truth? Like, what's the healing truth? What's the truth that's going to help me learn something important, as opposed to, be destructive or destroy or cause suffering, more suffering. And I think out of that realm, a lot of entities came through that they still don't look human, and then some of them might look, dangerous because they have, sharp teeth or something, but they're not. They're
Hmm.
highly intelligent. And the ones that interact with me the most, though, aside from the background noise crew, were these elongated head beings, the Dreamweavers. And everything they taught me through their impressions, same kind
Hmm.
of thing, psychic impressions, was, to take care of our own planet. It was more like a very sustainable vibe, very like, like there is nothing to be done or anywhere to go but to first learn how to coexist peacefully, with your environment, with your other humans, with the other organisms on your planet, and that's it. And the rest of all this ego game, like you're not going to get anywhere. And that was the whole vibe, and they never moved off of that. It was like, and they never showed me technology, like they never came in ships. These were beings that were like somewhere else, speaking to me from afar, and their job, was kind of just as teachers and uh, I mean, maybe they were the ones that were there when I died. I don't know, because they did mention that they help spirits transition
Hmm.
from one planet to another, or from one dimension to another, through different planetary bodies or existences of other containers of consciousness, or like we are. So I
Right.
I definitely don't feel like, when you reincarnate, you just come back and are human. I think it's, very possible you can go from being human to being, what we would call an alien species on some other planet, and if you have the same abilities of consciousness.
Hmm.
But I mean, and this is all stuff that's out there. So these are things that they, transmitted to me through this sort of impressionism, psychic
Yeah.
impressionism.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, like who do you share this with? What do you do with it? Which is why I started writing movie scripts because it's so, too
Yeah.
much, it's too much even for my art.
Yeah.
Like I'm a good artist, but I'm not so good that I can draw all this stuff out and metaphorically make visual meaning of it.
No. Do you feel like, and I'm kind of fishing here, this is a personal one, like, do you
Okay.
feel like people that are on the same kind of wavelength are being drawn together at the moment?
I hope so. I know myself, like I'm kind of a hermit, in the sense that where the town I live in is very small, surrounded by, pretty large like Bible Belt,
Yeah.
Christian community. I know there's sort of a Buddhist center here, but I haven't gone there. So I mean, and where I'm at personally, I don't feel too connected. But online, I
Hmm.
definitely have, gone out of my way to find like-minded individuals. I feel like
Yeah.
as an artist, I'm most drawn to the crew that label themselves visionary artists,
Yeah.
but I'm not in with them. Like they're not following me. I don't really put sacred geometry in my art as per se.
Hmm.
I'm not really painting the same things as them.
Hmm.
Like I said, I haven't really put myself out there professionally, so I'm kind of, a lot of people don't know about me, but I do follow their stuff, especially
Hmm.
like there's an artist down in gosh, I don't know where he lives, somewhere in South America. Could be Peru, could be, can't remember where he's from, but he does a lot of art that's kind of ayahuasca inspired. And
Yeah.
he's really good at translating like sort of, the animals, the jungle, and then the spirit world, and turning it into sort of a visual symphony that to me from looking at it is very realistic. So
Hmm.
I don't know how he did it, but he's very gifted at literally translating stuff that's very real on a very subtle energetic realm, spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
um I don't, I could send you his art when I find a link so
Yeah,
you don't.
love it. Love it. Again, I can like superimpose it on the screen so people can see what we're talking about. It's really interesting, man. I mean, three times today, because I've done two other interviews and one chat with a friend that I met through an interview about an NDE. We've
Yeah,
been talking about this flow state that you go
yeah,
into. And that sounds exactly like, I mean, that's how a psychic channels. That's how you described your art process. That's how,
yeah,
like, because I was talking, because obviously I play a lot of guitar, and
yeah,
one thing I try and describe is like, yes, you learn the notes, you learn how to play, but then when you're not just like reciting something, when you just switch your brain off and just go, like it's almost like you're in the passenger seat listening to yourself do
yeah,
this stuff. And I know that lots of like Tesla woke up with ideas in his head for inventions, and like some of the Beatles and Hendrix, he'd just wake up and be like, "Okay, right, I'm good to go," and the song would be completely in his head. Like, so I
Oh,
feel we're more like a radio getting a signal from stuff than actually creating it from scratch ourselves. It's something that really needs researching a little more, I think.
yeah, for sure. I agree with that totally.
Is there any advice you would give to people that have had an experience like you but not spoken about it yet, or are maybe struggling with the dealing with their experience?
I mean, I guess it depends on the experience, and it's hard to say because I think, some people have had negative experiences. I've had both, and yeah, I mean, just learn to accept it, learn to relate to it. I've done a lot of writing. Writing is really helpful to kind of write things out if you need to. Um, Poetry, whatever form, um, art, and like you just talked about, maybe talking with other people. If they feel safe.
Hmm.
It depends. I don't know. I'm very sensitive being, and I know a lot of people are. It seems like that have these experiences. So I think it's finding a safe space. The worst thing can be like even on Instagram, it's not always safe to write things out. You know what I mean? Like I've come to a place where I have made my profile private and I keep my numbers small as far as who's following me, and I only let people follow me that I like, that I look at every profile that tries to follow me, and because I've had people attack me from, I don't even know them,
Mm.
just for sharing feelings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just people get really violent and threatened by things they're afraid of, don't understand. I don't know where it's coming from, but if you're sensitive, and it's already a traumatic experience, that can be even more traumatizing.
Just
So
don't need it, do you? Yeah,
yeah,
it's just a, yeah. There's
it
a
grows
lot
with
of people
wine,
that this thing, whatever it is, seems to be very experiential. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that even somebody that trusts you better than anybody else, if you just lay it all out there, it just can't get in there until they have something like that happen to them. So when you throw in anonymity and the internet, it's a bit of a shark tank on there, isn't it? When you if you try
Oh
and
yeah.
talk about some of these really subjective experiences, but
Oh, and the mean people are always like, zero posts, picture, private profile, or no,
yeah, yeah,
they're always like
yeah,
they're
calling
not
you a
sharing, they're
coward,
not
yeah.
sharing anything.
Yeah.
They're just there to attack.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. But
Like
I don't know.
the other day I was driving with my dad. He lives about 20 minutes away from me, and I actually, for the first time ever in my life, I shared with him my actual first, big UFO experience, where I actually
Mm.
saw technology,
Oh
and that
wow.
and that was really interesting, to share with him because I never had, and I don't know, it's not that he's necessarily opposed, but for some reason it just had never come up because once again, it's just one of those things where you don't know who's going to be cool with it and who's not,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he was pretty okay with it.
Oh, that's good. I actually told mine the other day. So, like, my mum, she knows everything. My dad, because they're not
Yeah.
together. I finally told my dad the other day. He has no idea I've got like a YouTube channel and a podcast and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He thinks it's this thing I do. And the other
Yeah.
day we were talking, UFOs came up in the conversation. I was like, yeah, well, I got interested when I saw one. And he goes, oh, you should keep that to yourself. And I was just like, oh, yeah, will do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you still get treated like, "Oh, that's weird," like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
watch
I don't
out.
know. It's fun. So, do you mind just touching on your UFO sighting, or
UFO
like,
sightings? Oh wow.
yeah?
Uh
Because it seems to be kind of hand in hand. Like, something about this kicks the door open and is noticeable, and I believe it's the same thing, you know?
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, and I will say that I feel like that psychedelics have played a big part in opening a lot of people, at least in America, up because the programming is so thick. Sometimes you need that sledgehammer of a psychedelic substance, a psychoactive substance, to kind of blast through all the sort of perceptual dampening systems we've been given,
Hmm.
as far as what's real and what's not. And so, but I think also, it's like anything, moderation. Like I've always been somebody, I don't overdo that. I don't do it all the time because I've met people that do that, and it really does seem to mess them up. So
Hmm.
I've always wanted to, I think that definitely comes from my dad. I've always wanted to keep a firm grasp on what is real and what is not. I don't want to have any placebo, you
Hmm.
know, isms in my process. And so I've been, and when I do things, I treat it with respect, like a shaman, and and I try and take back what I learned there into my sober realm. And then, and so I feel like after years of that, my sober realm, became a very open place. Kind of like when you hear these guys who go over and they study meditation with some guru, and they come back changed, a changed person. I feel like it's very similar. It's very, as far as the realm of opening and just the subtleties, and I feel like that's where the sort of ETs and their craft and that whole realm of transdimensional entities and higher intelligences and consciousness come in and converge because they exist there, and I don't know if they use that, as sort of a super highway of communication across the cosmos. I don't, I'd be fascinated to know how good can you get at that, how precise, because I feel like, as a human and with the program I've been given, it's just happened. I've happened upon those systems. I didn't consciously, intentionally go there
Hmm. Hmm.
and find them out. Um, but gosh, UFOs. So I started seeing craft in the 90s, and they were mostly like they would flash in and out of scenes that I was looking at with my eyes. Like one time I was
Hmm.
driving up the Highway 15 in a town called Escondido, which is part of San Diego County, and we were near El Norte Parkway, or there's an exit to get off the highway there, and I was headed north on 15. And I remember looking, and all of a sudden there was just this giant ship that filled the whole valley.
Wow.
And then it was like flashing in and out of my visual. And I mean, I was sober, I wasn't having a trippy day and I wasn't having any trippy thoughts, but all of a sudden that was what I was seeing, and it was literally like flashing in and out. And it was a weird flashing too because it had the when it would appear, it had no color. It was more like a drawing of it, like it had a
Hmm.
form. It had been drawn there, but then it would flux out into it, and then I'd see the valley again, and it was there, and then it wasn't. Okay, and I was like, all right, that was strange. And then years later, I was in coming down from Sedona, Arizona, and looked across, and in the desert, there was a giant ship, similar shape and size, and shape.
Hmm.
The shape was like did you watch that new the new Superman with Henry Cavill,
Hmm.
the Man of Steel?
Yep.
And you remember like the Kryptonians had their big kind of their big explorer ships had a kind
Hmm.
of a, I don't know, like it's like a nut or something kind of shape,
Yeah.
kind of big and very similar. These ships were very similar. And I mean, this is, way before those movies were created. Which
Yep.
again, like for me as an artist, like I find that there's a lot of times that like different artists will draw things that I've seen in my dreams. So I
Yeah.
think we're all definitely tapped into similar
Yeah.
things. Technology, I think, even comes through in that same transdimensional portal of imagination. As
Hmm.
far as like people are doing weapons, science and engineering, I think we're all tapping into that same
Hmm.
codex, if you will, of data. Um, but I mean, that's just something I've come to later in life. At the time, I was just experiencing, these strange phenomena. So similar ship, but even much larger because it'd have to be for the distance it was and how much space it was taking up. It was huge. It had to be miles long. It was
Mm.
a really big ship, and it did the same thing where, it was there and then it wasn't. But this time it had color, but it was really far away. But I mean, it was dark. It wasn't just like the shape of it or the drawn design of it.
Hmm.
And then years later, I remember experiencing craft moving in strange, zigzags
Hmm.
of a Joshua tree, and so I saw that. And then years later after that, maybe like 3 years later after that, I remember seeing what I thought were satellites, like tracking across the sky where it looks like a
Hmm.
star going in a straight line, and then they'd stop and start doing,
Oh, wow.
crazy, crazy patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in 90, no wait, 2013. 2013, I was coming back. This is what the experience I just described to my dad.
Hmm.
Coming back from Oroville, which is in Northern California above Sacramento inland. And I remember I was leaving this farm up there and with my girlfriend at the time. And I remember having this little thought because I was already thinking about the way we were going to drive home because we were driving back to San Diego that, oh, hey, maybe we'll see a UFO. Because I remember going through this valley before with another friend and it was just way up there and I remember I really liked it and I really wanted to see that valley again because it's like right up, if you know the Sierra Nevadas, it's south of Lake Tahoe. And it's like kind of way up at like 10,000 feet on a plateau before you drop down because on the backside of the Sierra Nevadas it's like a cliff and it
Hmm.
just drops down to the old highway 395, which is where then you have the desert behind that. And um so I was like, huh, I wonder, I know I'm going to go that way. And, I wonder if I'll see a UFO. And I remember on the drive, I kept thinking about that, like, almost like an excitement, like, oh, I really want to get to that place. And I mean, we made stops along the way, like, but it was always in my mind when I get back on the road. And so we turned left at Sacramento and I was going to take her up to Grass Valley over to the top of Lake Tahoe, North Lake Tahoe, and then drive along the Western Road because it's really beautiful, and then continue down. Well, I got lost. They were working on the highway. All of a sudden, and this is like before I had like a flip phone. I have a map, with
Yeah.
maps kind of phone,
Yeah.
right? So I had a map book, and and so when they had, all of a sudden the road to Grass Valley, somehow I got turned off, and I found myself, I know now, on a road that was going to the south around the South Lake Tahoe. So totally off. Drove right into a snowstorm, and I was in like a all-wheel drive Subaru Outback. So not, like
Nice.
the ideal car. I mean, people say they are, but I'd much rather drive a four-wheel drive than all-wheel drive in snow. So
Yeah.
I was going really slow. I remember seeing deer, I mean, we're in the thick of it. It's like snow just coming down. Like we were just on this journey. Time was like slowed my trip way down. So like when I thought we would be at that plateau, now I was like, I don't know when we're gonna get there. I mean, it was like we're having to drive like 10 miles an hour in a blizzard,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's good we did because there were cars wrecked on the side of the road. I mean, it was a blizzard, and so we drive out of the blizzard. So somebody that's sitting on that southwestern slope, drive out. We end up in South Lake Tahoe, and it's totally clear. Get some snacks and for the road, hit it again and we drove down south through the Toyabe National Forest or something. It's a very strange spelling. Uh, and I remember we turned left, and then we took the road I wanted, and we got up on into that valley, way up high. And the first thing that was really weird was it was a mountain hare, which I since found what it was. It's called a mountain hare. It's a white rabbit, really
Hmm.
big, and it was walking on 2 feet in the middle of the road and would not get out of our way. So
Whoa.
yeah, it was really, we were both like, my
Welcome
girlfriend
to
was like,
Wonderland. Yeah.
yeah, we were like, what in the heck is going on? So we had slowed down, and I mean, there was no one else on this road. It was probably midnight at that point. It was like we were running late. We are gonna be driving all night. And me and my girlfriend just like, this is so weird. This is so weird. And this rabbit would not gather, it just kept walking in front of us on 2 legs. I mean, and it was a big rabbit. Like it probably stood at least 3 feet tall, walking along in front of us. And then it kind of like walked off onto the road, went down like a rabbit, hopped a lot for a little bit, and I started to speed up, like, okay, that was interesting. And then it hopped back and got back on 2 feet in front of us again and would not let us go. So
Wow.
yeah, so this is where things get weird because we have our my memory and her memory, they split off on what happened.
That's
But the
interesting.
rabbit, yeah, there was a tree. I remember there was like a pull off where that rabbit had been, a tree, and then a little bit further up, and the valley out to our right, and you can see like a ridge going up around it. And then the rabbit was like walking past the tree, and then there was a dirt road on the left, and the rabbit walked up onto the road. Well, I remember because that rabbit was so trippy. I remember I felt like I got off and I parked the car and I followed that white rabbit. Something like right out of like Alice in Wonderland. I followed the rabbit. My girlfriend was like, we just drove on.
Hmm.
So we have a split there.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was strange that we both remember different things. I remember following the rabbit and having like a really trippy experience, but I don't know. It's like I said, it's framed in that sort of dream
Yep.
realm. I don't know if that was real or not. And this would have
Yep.
been a really thick one to where I almost felt as if someone had messed with my memory because it
Mm-hmm.
was like really hard to get through what happened after I followed the rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll describe, the her version. So we drove on and we drove up around that valley, and then what it did was it kind of went south and it started doing a switchback down this, cliff face to get down to the
Mm-hmm.
whole dock 395. So I think we were on like our third back and forth, and we're headed south, going down, facing south. And I remember like something like a light like turned on the upper atmosphere to our right, and it was so bright like it lit up the whole valley. And I mean, I looked, and she looked, and it was like then there was this feeling like a like into a real high pitch, like a rural and a high pitch sound, and then it just like turned colors. It went through like the full spectrum of colors and did like a zigzag, like zing, 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 like that, like in half a second, like shoo, 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 really
Mm.
fast, like left a light trail. It moved so fast, and then went down into the valley, turned red, and just disappeared. And me and my girlfriend were both just like, "Do you, looked at each other like, what the hell was that?" And it was so. I mean, to me, it was like obviously a craft, and it was obviously a thing, and the way it moved was so surreal, and it just had a feeling to it, like there was a feeling that came with it,
Yeah.
like to the technology, and I don't know if it was just a reaction to how strange it was, or if it actually projected anything,
Yep.
but and I went on MUFON when I got home, and I wrote out that experience and where it was. And there had been others who had seen sightings, and there was actually a rumor that I found that there was an alien base somewhere in those mountains, right in that zone where I
Okay.
was. So it
Yeah.
was interesting to find that there was other reports in the same
What
area.
was the if you don't mind, what
Yeah,
was the feeling that you felt?
familiar. It
Okay.
felt familiar. In fact, it almost looked like when they did that zigzag, they spelled an S like my name. I mean, it was, it
Right.
felt like they were
Yeah, yeah,
sending a
yeah.
message like, "Hey, Shen," like,
Yeah,
and
oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like later on, like I had a memory that when I followed that rabbit, that I had a sort of, abduction type experience, but a very
That was going to
positive.
be my next question. Yeah, was like
Yeah.
because I'm really into the history of this, and it's not like this is where we just peel away from normal science because regularly very dependable people have different accounts, and it's like I believe it can like this stuff's. I mean, I'm not going to waffle about it, but I think it's kind of
Mm.
outside of time, and it gives you impressions in your mind as to what are happening, and those don't always correlate because different people have different psyches, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
just out of interest, what was your? Let's kind of wind it back to we're seeing the white rabbit off to the
Yeah.
left.
So, I mean, I remember pulling off, parking, and getting out and following the White Rabbit because at that point I'd already been into sweat lodges. I had been, done yoga, meditation. I felt the significance of what was happening. It was too strange to just be like, well, that was weird, and drive on. It was like I wanted
Mm.
to follow the White Rabbit, and I did, and I feel like my girlfriend came with me, but she doesn't remember anything. Like the whatever memory block they did on her work took really well. Whereas me, like those things don't work very well on me. Like, yeah. Anyway, so follow the white rabbit. At some point, the rabbit shape shifted into its real form. Because I've always like when you're interacting with the entities too, it's important to kind of make them know that you're not afraid to see their true form, because they will show you illusions to kind of pacify your fear. I like to just get down nitty gritty and like, what do you really look like? And it was like cute, cute little ET. Not any I've ever heard of. They were small. They were really small. Like they were probably like maybe less than 2 feet tall. Kind of. They had digits like we do. They had the sort of atypical black eyes. They weren't grays. No way they were the grays. They were very kind. They remind me of Japanese. They're very precise and very mentally competent, but also very like jovial,
Hmm.
very happy little beings. Because they had a ship, and it was one of those where it was one shape and size on the outside and then different when you went inside. So they
Mm.
definitely like manipulated physics somehow or something because, it was like walking into a Harry Potter tent, like at that scene at cribbage finals
Yeah.
where all of a sudden it was like, whoa, we're in yeah, it like went from being like, a school bus size to being like an aircraft carrier inside. And I didn't find it disorienting, but I think my girlfriend did, and I think that at that point they kind of pacified her.
Mm.
I remember them just scanning us, our brains, our thoughts. Uh, but they still blocked my memory. And I don't know, I feel like maybe that was just some sort of imperative on their part. Like I feel like, because I had to think about it a lot. It took many years to get rid of all the blocks. And it still was like, did that really happen? Uh, but I feel like there was this one science officer who was very adamant about no matter how cool I was with it, they were going to, block out that memory.
Hmm.
But the science officers that I interacted with were like really kind, really gentle, very fun. Like I said, I was not scared at all. I don't remember any pain or them doing anything painful to me. They're very kind and very curious, and I think that they had been somehow interacting with me all day because of that impression I got, and that I was so driven to go that way. But at that point, I wasn't conscious of their interaction or anything. Yeah, they were sweet. I miss them. I feel like, just like with the death experience, it can be hard to keep on living in this sort of mundane
Mm.
reality when you've had these experiences that are so surreal and feel so much better than, Trump or Putin and all this murder and mayhem and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
all this monkey
hor-
business that we're dealing
all
with.
this horrible. Oh, Putin wants to
Yeah,
blow
yeah,
us all up with nuclear weapons. Like, thanks, bro. Like it's just like the threats that are happening here are just so disgusting. And so I always laugh, when I see when they try and do the whole, alien invasion threat. I'm just like, dude, I'm afraid of you guys. I'm not afraid of the
yeah.
ET. ETs are so much cooler than you, and their tech is so much better, and they're just so much more
Yeah,
kind, and intelligent, and their consciousness so much more expansive, and they're just so much more open-minded.
yeah.
Uh,
It's
but yeah,
funny
I'm sorry.
when people like people keep saying like, oh, yeah, we've because obviously this is all kind of some big Scooby-Doo mystery and to a lot of people and a lot of people are like, oh, we found these and they've got nefarious intent and they're doing this to control us and then they're going to invade. And it's like, dude, come on, like if they wanted to, it would have already happened. Like whatever we discover, the end
Totally.
result is what we consider normal everyday life. It's like, it's just like the raccoons in a safari park realize that somebody's bringing the food every day. It's like just because they realize that there's this organization principle, it doesn't mean that they're gonna do us any harm. We're
Um,
powerless against it, and that's not a bad thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So these little, I mean, just to sort of finish up on that story, these little beings, like I said, they're very playful, very fun, very curious, and but very smart. Very smart, and they scanned us. They were interacting with me. They were also, it was all psychic impressionism. There was no conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I honestly, like, I don't know that I didn't not want to go with them. I mean, I felt very at home with them, but I think they once again had a directorate where, that wasn't, so even they had, sort of a hierarchy
Hmm.
within their ship. And so even though some of the beings I interacted with were, kind to me, others were very, all about security on their end,
Hmm.
uh, protecting themselves, and so it had a structure. They had definitely had a structure to their whole thing. Because I mean, I remember from the military and being in submarines, you have to have that structure when you're dealing with, these huge technologies of a ship and the running of it. You have to have
Yeah.
order sort of, and people take orders, and so they had
Hmm.
a, just like us, they had a structure
Hmm.
to the whole. ship and system. And I probably saw about 30, 30 to 40 of these in just in the realm I was within, because they
Hmm.
only took me into a room. Like when where I came access their ship, it was just a big science lab. They didn't take me in any of the control center. They didn't take me on a tour of the ship. It was just about studying us and extracting what data they could. I mean, it definitely took, blood samples, cell samples, and examined. I think they did a full mental scan. I don't remember if they were able to fully figure everything out about us. I don't remember how high tech they were as far as, being able to download like our lifetime or whatever, but they
Hmm.
definitely got a good impression of us. And my girlfriend and I were very different types of people. So I don't know what, like I said, she doesn't remember us at all, but I feel confident I don't remember them doing anything bad to us. So
Hmm.
it wasn't a negative abduction at all. It was a very friendly um, experience. And then I don't remember. I for the life of me can't remember getting back to my car.
Hmm.
I definitely, and I definitely can't remember, the part where I started the car back up and we got back on the road and drove away. But I mean, to me, it's not so strange because sometimes I can drive down the road and go into a thought process and I don't remember the last 30 minutes of my drive and I didn't wreck and I go off the road and I don't know how that, so even I don't understand what goes on. But I do
Yeah.
feel when I came to that memory that that was definitely, the ship that I saw so much later off the valley. That was them
Mm.
saying, "Hey, Shen, like, see ya." So, very
Yeah.
playful, even with all that high tech, very just like, take care, man.
Yeah. 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 It's
And I
interesting
haven't had any. Go ahead.
when you listen to like Betty and Barney Hill,
Mm,
um, their hypnosis tapes. Like Barney's is scary, but like
yeah,
Betty's, they were in separate rooms and she's like laughing and joking with these things. She was asking him if she could if she could keep a book because she's like, no one's going to believe me, and if I take this book, I can show them, and I can, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I could introduce you to like our
yeah,
politicians and stuff,
yeah,
and then like they let her get this map out and she's like, where are you from? And he's like, well, where's Earth on here? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, why do you need to know where we are? It's like there's this sense of humor. There's a definite warmth to it, and you feel like maybe they're just trying to keep her busy whilst they're doing whatever they're doing to Barney. But it's like there's this definite difference between their experiences, and
yeah.
it sounds very similar to what you're describing.
Well, so then, so that happened. I did the MUFON report. Then within that time, before my girlfriend and I moved to Colorado, I had an aunt and uncle who lived, gosh, what do you call that area? It's kind of near Canyon Lake, not Lake Havasu. Do you know Canyon Lake area of California?
Not at
So,
all.
it's above Temecula, and there's I think, oh no, I keep forgetting the name. Let me look really quick so I don't get this wrong because
Hmm.
I want to get the area right. But so I'm at a family party and I have a huge family, and so my aunt and uncle are talking to me about because it's kind of over time, it kind of it came out, that I was kind of the interesting family member with the interesting experiences, right?
The colorful crayon of the
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was sort of the safe person to talk to about strange phenomena at Lake
Yeah.
Elsinore, called Lake Elsinore. So this is
Okay.
south of LA, south of Corona. Um, and so they came up to me and like kind of like your dad, like took me aside like where no one else would hear, and told me that they saw like an armada of ships, like in perfect daylight, like broad daylight, all white, and just a huge, I mean, probably, over 100, like all in
Wow.
formation, flying kind of in a northwesterly direction, above Lake Elsinore. And I was like, really? Like, that's cool. And they were like, yeah, but like their generation, they didn't know who to tell or who. So, but they told me. So I went on MUFON and reported it for them.
Right.
And what was interesting when I reported it, after I reported it, there was all these other people that saw that same formation, and had different reactions to it and had reported it. And so it was like,
Fascinating.
so,
That just
so
goes back to what we were saying, man. It's like it's this like thing that's just such a private, personal thing, but it's like everybody in the yeah, like there's been a few situations because now I'm just like I just embrace being the weird guy and I don't mind being like,
Yeah,
yeah, I've seen UFOs. Like that's cool. It's
totally.
just but it's so you'll tell a room full of people or say 10 people and then they'll all like laugh it off and then three of them will come over to you afterwards and be like, I've never told anyone this, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen and it's like, oh come on, like where were you like 5 minutes ago when everybody's laughing in the room, man?
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. Yeah, it's thick. So that would have been 2013. The experience with the girlfriend and actual abduction and craft, that would have been 2013, like fall, maybe like October.
Hmm.
So then it would have been, I think, December when I talked to those relatives. And then by like February or March of 2014, my girlfriend and I like moved out to Denver. Well, that was like a recipe for disaster. We ended up like ending, and so by like June, I think it was June of that year, we were done, and I went to this festival, first time gone to a music festival forever. It was called Sonic Bloom, and it was down in oh no, no, wait, I'm totally no, we lasted longer than that. 2015. See, as I mean, like, when you move a lot, I move a lot.
Yeah.
2015, June of 2015, I went to this music festival, Sonic Bloom, and it's down in the southeastern corner, just past Pueblo of on Highway 25 of Colorado, and it was way out, kind of like in this Hummingbird Ranch spot, or that's what it's called, and it's kind of an interesting area. It's kind of what they would call Front Range. It's on the east side of the Rockies, so if you look west, you just see the Rockies like drive up high, and there's layers of them, so you see kind of like different heights, and they get obviously taller behind the other mountains you're seeing in the forefront. And you know that festival, like, I think it was like the third day in, one night I was looking, and kind of come back from camp after dancing for like hours during that day, went back, took a break, came back, and I remember as I was walking to go back into the party, I looked up and there were just these like three stars, like a perfect triangle. And I was like, I've never seen that constellation, like what is that? They caught my eye, and I mean, I remember looked right at them and noticed them. They weren't necessarily much brighter than other stars, but just their shape and their clarity, they were, pretty clear. And I don't know they twinkled the same either as a lot of the other stars. And so I just kind of just sat down immediately and just looked at them, just would not stop. And probably like 30 minutes into my, like, staring contest, they broke formation, and they did move, and they moved really slowly, and they moved into another formation, then they went still again.
Wow.
And that night I like drew a picture that I think was like, I don't know if it was channeled from them or what, but I was definitely moving something. But when I went home, uh I started having these dreams. And this is my first experience with sort of, maybe I'm not malevolent, but just kind of like not a very nice ET species. So it was one of the pilots from those ships. He made that known. And he was mean. He was very intelligent. He was really not very nice looking. He had a huge big head with like bulbous veins and big bulging eyes that were more human than, they weren't black. Had pupils, and but they were very like bulgy. And he was kind of short, but just this huge head with these big bulbous eyes and this little tiny mouth, a little tiny nose. And he was a dick. That's all I can say. I mean, like you meet people and like they're nice, they're cool, even if they're smart. Like if they've learned how to be smart and still be nice, then they are that. They're like intellectual. They're good to talk. This guy was very arrogant, very mean, very condescending in everything about him. And he did this psychic impressionism, and he was just all about hypercritical viewpoint of humanity and of my own. I mean, made it very personal of me. And he seemed to be really angry with me, like, because I wasn't, like, as if I were to blame for everything happening on this planet. He's
Hmm.
putting a lot of that blame on me. Like, look what you guys are
Oh yeah.
doing, kind of vibe, like, this is disgusting. You're so pitiful. Like, it's very critical. And I
It's
mean,
like
he
when the
never,
boomers shout at the girl behind the counter in the cafe, as
he was
opposed to the blaming the
mean.
business. Yeah.
Yeah, he was really mean, dude. And I took it, he haunted me before I go to sleep for like 3 days. And I took it, and the last day I was finally just like, I was fed up with, being blamed for everything and just this whole take on it. And I let him know, I said, you seem really intelligent, but you're kind of missing, a big part here. Like, I did not create this. If I do have some superpower that I somehow created this, and teach me how to use it because I'd change it all. I was like, why don't you just, I was, my mind was basically like, why don't you teach me? If I have all this potential, why don't you teach me how to use it as opposed to
Hmm.
just criticizing me? And basically ended with kind of like, I really would appreciate help. Like, we need help. Like, you don't understand. Like down here, if you try and do anything, they kill you and there is no more me. So with that kind of like threat, like why would you expect me to like rise up,
Hmm.
and get a revolution? Like that's just, I might as well just kill myself at home. And also it's a game, right? Like I was trying to explain to them, like they're baiting me to be violent or to be a revolutionary. Like I don't want to play that game. Like they should change because they have to change, not because they should or we're forcing them to.
Yeah.
And just put and he finally and he shut up and he let me alone. But that was my first interaction with like more intense aggro kind of like mean alien
Hmm.
species. So I know they're out there. I definitely there's ones that are not down with humanity and they definitely don't like us and they're definitely judging us and I feel like rightfully so. I don't like us either.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, but
Yeah.
but I do like a lot of people here, but I'm just saying, the
Absolutely.
ones that are really hurting people and lying to people and poisoning them and torturing them and killing them and I there's so much like bad people down here.
Yeah. We've got a lot of work to do, man.
Yeah, and I think, like since then, that might have been my last experience that, consciously, like where I saw craft. No, there was one other when was that? That would have been like so many like 4 years ago
Hmm.
or 2025. No, it would have been 20, yeah, it would have been 2022, 2020. 2020, I had a friend from the East Coast come out and we're out on my back deck and we saw orange lights in the sky to the southwest, just sitting there for like an hour or two, not moving, just hovering there. But other than that, though, the only major like close contact was that one in California in 2013, and it impacted me. And I've tried to reach out to those bros, to that species,
Yeah.
you know, because they were just so cool. But I don't know that I'm very skilled at that astral projection.
I think
I'm
intent goes for not to presume I know any more than
sorry.
anybody else, but I think your intention is certainly like 9/10 of the law as far as it goes, like my mum my mum's a psychic medium and she says like I don't need to know how an engine works to drive a car and I think that goes a long way with kind of
That's
trying to figure this out and make contact and whatnot. But that's amazing, man. So I've had such a blast. Like it's been great getting to know you.
so I mean, I hope it's like for me, like I understand people that haven't had the experience not believing in it, because I don't think I would have believed until I had the
Hmm.
experience. Because my grandfather, he was a bomber or a pilot in the Pacific
Oh wow.
and Navy in World War II, and he
Hmm.
saw craft and would talk about it when I was a kid. And his sister had a communion type experience, where
Wow.
ET like went through walls and did a probe on her mind, and she had a burn
Yeah,
mark
yeah.
the next morning that he
Whoa.
actually saw. And so I heard these stories as a kid,
Yeah.
but I didn't believe until I had my own experience. And so I
Till
guess
it's
for
in your
me,
lane, yeah.
yeah, I just would hope that everybody can have that experience so they can know, because when you really had contact and then it's not all this government cover up and all the psyops aspect of it just kind of
Yeah.
falls away and it's just kind of an annoying
Yeah.
aspect as opposed to like really,
Yeah,
like I don't
yeah,
know what to
yeah.
believe.
Yeah, it's hard enough to describe when you're kind of starting at neutral, let alone starting with like that's impossible. It's like, well, wait. You know,
Uh,
so
I just
that's
I hope they show up so everybody can have that experience.
yeah,
It would really help if they just do that. So that's what I put out there a lot to them. It's like, we're ready. Go ahead and just, really show
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It'd be a good thing.
Amazing, Shen. It's been an absolute honor, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
And
dude,
yeah, I can only hope that we'll keep in touch. And
for
and
sure.
anytime you wanna kick back with a coffee and have a chat, that'd be awesome.